She called me useless once. My sister-in-law stopped chewing. She looked at me, then at the envelope on the counter, and didn't say anything at all. The words sat there longer than the plates. My mother-in-law reached for her water and drank like she'd just finished a sentence, not started one. The clink of ice was too loud. I kept my hands in my lap. The chair legs pressed into the tile when my husband shifted, then stopped. The envelope had been there since the afternoon. White. Thick. The corner bent where it had hit the floor when the mail slid off the stack. Her name was printed across the front in neat black type. Not mine. I hadn't moved it because it wasn't mine to open. I hadn't moved it because moving it would mean answering a question no one had asked yet. "Do you want more chicken?" she said to my husband, already lifting the serving spoon. He shook his head. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at her either. The spoon hovered, then went back down. No one reached for the envelope. The waiter passed by and glanced at the table, waiting for someone to make eye contact. No one did. He kept going. The ceiling fan clicked once, then settled. My sister-in-law swallowed and wiped her mouth with her napkin, slower than she needed to. I stacked my fork and knife the way I always do, parallel, points facing the plate. It was a habit from somewhere I couldn't remember. When I finished, I folded my napkin and set it on top. The envelope stayed where it was, touching the edge of the counter like it had grown there. "She doesn't do much," my mother-in-law added, lighter this time, as if the first word hadn't landed. "I mean, you know." No one said they didn't know. I stood and carried my plate to the sink. The water ran before I turned it on, the pipe coughing first. I rinsed the plate, stacked it, wiped the counter where nothing had spilled. Behind me, chairs scraped. Someone laughed too quickly at something that hadn't been funny. When I turned back, my sister-in-law was still watching the envelope. Not openly. Just enough that I noticed. She looked up when she felt my eyes and pressed her lips together, then nodded once, like she'd decided something privately. We left soon after. My mother-in-law hugged my husband. She patted my arm. Her hand was warm. "Drive safe," she said, as if that covered everything. In the car, the radio stayed off. The streetlights came on one by one. I watched them pass over the windshield, counted to 10 between intersections. My husband cleared his throat. "She didn't mean it like that," he said, looking straight ahead. I didn't answer. I watched a leaf stick to the glass and peel away. At home, I set my keys in the bowl by the door. I took off my shoes and lined them up. The envelope was in my bag because she'd handed it to me without comment when we were leaving, like it had always been mine. The paper was heavier than it looked. The return address was printed in the corner, official enough to matter. I put it on the kitchen counter. Same spot, different room. Later, when the house was quiet, I opened it. Inside were forms clipped together, clean and sharp, a checklist on top, boxes, dates, names. One of them was mine, printed smaller, not where a name usually went. Under responsible party, there was a blank line. I closed it and slid the papers back into the envelope. I didn't seal it. I set it flat, squared the edges, and left it where it was. The next morning, my phone buzzed while I was tying my shoes. An appointment reminder, intake, Tuesday at 9. I didn't remember making it. I added it to the calendar anyway and tapped save. At breakfast, the envelope stayed on the counter. My husband poured coffee and glanced at it, then away. "What's that?" he asked, already stirring. "Mail," I said. He nodded, like that answered something. On Tuesday, the waiting room smelled like disinfectant and old magazines. A sign-in sheet lay on a clipboard at the desk. I wrote my name in the next empty line and slid it back. The pen left a faint groove where someone had pressed too hard before me. My mother-in-law sat straight, hands folded over her purse. She smiled at the coordinator when she came out, like this was familiar territory. I stood when they called us back and picked up the envelope. The paper brushed my wrist. At the desk, the coordinator flipped through the forms, checking boxes with a practiced motion. She paused once, then again. Her finger stopped on a line. "Who's listed as the responsible party?" she asked, not looking up yet. The room went quiet enough that I could hear the pen click when she uncapped it. The envelope sat on my counter like it had always lived there. I moved it once, just to wipe the coffee ring underneath, then put it back in the exact same spot. The paper made a soft drag sound when it slid. My husband came in behind me and opened a cabinet too hard. The hinge squeaked. He kept the door open longer than necessary, staring at the mugs like he was deciding something important. "You opened it?" he asked. I rinsed a sponge under the tap and wrung it out slowly. "I looked," I said. He nodded. Then nothing. The silence had weight in the kitchen. It wasn't angry. It was practiced. He finally closed the cabinet and picked a mug without looking. "Mom said it was for her," he said, like he was correcting the label on a jar. "It has her name on the front," I said. "And it's here," he added. I didn't answer. I turned the envelope over and traced the edge of the return address with my thumb. The print was crisp, official, the kind that doesn't come from a home printer, the kind that gets filed. My husband poured coffee. The stream hit the mug and steamed up his glasses. He wiped them with the hem of his shirt, then set the mug down and slid it an inch away from the edge. Careful. That was how he handled tension. Tiny adjustments. Nothing that could be called an argument. When he left for work, he pushed his chair back with his foot and caught it before it scraped. He paused with his hand on the doorknob, like he expected me to say something. I didn't. The door clicked shut. I waited until the house was empty before I pulled the forms out again. They were clipped together in the corner. The checklist was still on top, boxes with neat labels. ID, insurance, emergency contact, responsible party. That last line was a blank space, longer than the others, like the writer assumed someone would know what to do with it. Under the clip was a packet with a name I hadn't seen before, printed in small type on the bottom of each page. Not my name. Not my mother-in-law's name either. The patient's name. That's when the word "from dinner" tried to crawl back in. Useless. Not yelled. Not whispered. Just placed. I set the packet down and picked up my phone. I didn't scroll. I didn't open a dozen tabs. I tapped the number printed on the form with the pad of my finger and held the phone to my ear. It rang twice. A calm, recorded voice answered. Hours. Extension options. A slow, neutral list. I listened through the whole thing, then pressed 0. The line clicked and went to voicemail. "This is the intake office," the voicemail said. "Please leave your name, the patient's name, and the best number to reach you." I stared at the blank line on the form while the beep sounded. I left my name. I said the patient's name carefully, the way you say something you don't want to get wrong. I gave my number. I didn't explain why I was calling. When I hung up, the kitchen felt louder. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. I slid the forms back into the envelope and squared the edges against the counter twice until the corners lined up. That afternoon, my sister-in-law stopped by with a tote bag of hand-me-downs for her kid. She set the bag by the door and kicked her shoes off with one foot, then froze when she saw the envelope. She didn't point. She didn't ask right away. She washed her hands first, taking her time with the soap like she needed the extra seconds. "Is that the thing from dinner?" she asked finally, drying her hands on a dish towel. I kept my fingers on the envelope flap. "She handed it to me when we left," I said. My sister-in-law's mouth tightened for a second, then relaxed. She pulled out a chair and sat, but she didn't lean back. Her knee bounced once under the table, then stopped. "She does that," she said, "drops something and makes it your problem." I lifted one shoulder, not a shrug big enough to be a statement. Just movement. My sister-in-law looked down at her hands. She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve and wrapped it around her finger. "You didn't say anything," she said. More like she was checking a fact than praising it. "I didn't," I said. She nodded once. Sometimes that's the only way not to give her what she wants. The sentence hung there. She didn't follow it with a lecture. She didn't say what I should do next. She just reached over and nudged the envelope a fraction of an inch, then pulled her hand back like it was hot. "What is it?" she asked. I slid the envelope toward her, just enough that she could see the return address and the name on the front. She read it. Her eyebrows lifted. Then she looked at me, the question forming without words. "I called," I said. "I left a message." My sister-in-law's eyes went to my phone, then to the envelope again. She didn't touch it. "Mom's been handling all that?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "I know this is here." She sat back carefully. The chair legs made a small scrape anyway. We both heard it. Neither of us commented. After she left, the house felt emptier than before. I stood at the sink and rinsed a glass that wasn't dirty. I dried it and put it away. I wiped the counter in slow strokes around the envelope instead of moving it again. At 6, my husband came home and loosened his tie in the doorway. He saw the envelope immediately, like it was a person in the room. "Did you talk to her?" he asked, meaning his mother. "I called the office," I said. He exhaled through his nose, a quiet release. "She'll be mad you went around her," he said. I set a plate on the table and slid it into place. The ceramic made a soft click. "I called the number on the paper," I said. "That's not going around anything." He opened his mouth, then closed it. He pulled a chair out and sat. He didn't push it in all the way. His knees stayed angled like he might stand up quickly. His phone buzzed on the table. He flipped it over, screen down, without reading it. The motion was fast, too fast for something harmless. A few minutes later, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Same area code as the intake office. I looked at the screen until the last ring, then answered. "Hi," a woman said, voice calm and professional. I could hear papers moving on her end, the quick flutter of pages. "This is intake returning your call. I just need to confirm one thing before Tuesday." I gripped the edge of the counter with my free hand. The envelope was an inch from my fingers. "Yes," I said. There was a pause, the kind that happens when someone reads something twice. "Who," she asked carefully, "is listed as the responsible party on your packet?" The intake office was brighter than it needed to be. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, steady and unforgiving. A line of chairs hugged the wall, knees almost touching. A television mounted in the corner played with the sound off, closed captions crawling across the bottom. The coordinator sat behind a low desk with a computer angled just enough that I couldn't see the screen. A clipboard rested beside the keyboard. Our sign-in sheet lay underneath it, my name halfway down the page, the ink still dark. She looked at the packet again. The pause from the phone call had followed us here, stretched thin over 2 days, long enough to feel intentional. "I just need to confirm something," she said, the same words as before, now spoken to the room. My mother-in-law leaned forward before anyone else could. "I've always handled this," she said, smile fixed, hand already reaching for her purse. The zipper buzzed open and closed. The coordinator didn't look up. She ran a finger down the checklist, box by box, tapping once when she reached the blank line. The sound was light, almost polite. "This line is empty," she said. "Responsible party." I stood still. The envelope was tucked under my arm, its edge pressing into my ribs. My husband shifted beside me, his shoe scraping against the tile. He stopped when he heard it. "I'm listed as an emergency contact," my mother-in-law said quickly. "That's probably what you're seeing." "That's Pause's 1,000 for self." The coordinator nodded, still reading. "Emergency contact is filled," she said. "This is different." She finally looked up. Her eyes moved from my mother-in-law to me, then back to the form. No judgment, just sequence. "We need one name," she said, "the person authorized to sign and make decisions." A couple waiting behind us fell quiet. A man with a baseball cap adjusted it on his knee. A woman folded her arms and leaned back, watching without pretending she wasn't. My sister-in-law's face flashed through my mind, the way she'd nodded once at the kitchen table. I didn't move. "Well," my mother-in-law said, laugh soft and quick, "it's obvious, isn't it?" She gestured vaguely, palm up, then dropped her hand. "I've been doing all of this." The coordinator tilted her head, reading again. "The packet lists a different phone number," she said, "and the voicemail we returned was from—" She checked the screen. "Her." She didn't say my name out loud yet. She waited. The silence stretched. The television captions kept moving. Someone coughed down the hall. My husband looked at me then. Not accusing, not defensive, just looking, like he was seeing the space where a word could go and realizing it wasn't his. "That's my wife," he said finally, voice low. He pointed with 2 fingers, then dropped his hand back to his side. The coordinator nodded once. She uncapped her pen. The click was loud in the quiet. "Okay," she said. "We'll need to verify." My mother-in-law's smile tightened. "Verify what?" she asked. "Who's responsible?" The coordinator said, already writing. "It's routine." She slid the clipboard toward us. The sign-in sheet peeked out from underneath, names stacked neatly. My mother-in-law hesitated before reaching for the pen. The delay was small. Everyone noticed it anyway. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "There's a step," the coordinator said. "That's all." End quote. She stood and disappeared through a door without waiting for a response. The door closed softly behind her. No one spoke. The man with the baseball cap cleared his throat and stood, stretching his legs. The woman crossed and uncrossed her arms. A child's voice echoed faintly from somewhere deeper in the building. My mother-in-law held the pen without writing. She looked at the form, then at me. Her mouth opened, closed. She tapped the pen once against the clipboard and set it down. My husband exhaled. I felt it, more than heard it. When the coordinator came back, she carried the packet and a phone. "I'm going to make a couple calls," she said. "We'll sort it out." She didn't ask us to follow. She didn't ask us to leave. She just walked back through the door, leaving the clipboard behind. The room stayed quiet after she left, like it was waiting for permission to breathe again. The coordinator didn't come back right away. Minutes passed the way they do in offices like that, measured by nothing but the hum of lights and the scrape of shoes down the hall. My mother-in-law sat straighter than before, purse clutched in both hands now. She crossed her legs, uncrossed them, crossed them the other way. Each movement was controlled. None of them landed. My husband leaned back against the wall and stared at a framed poster about patient rights. He read it from top to bottom, then started again, slower. I watched his reflection in the glass as much as I watched the door. I kept the envelope on my lap. The paper warmed through my clothes. I ran my thumb along the edge until it caught on the bent corner and stopped. When the door opened again, it wasn't the coordinator alone. A clerk followed her, holding a thin stack of papers and a phone pressed to her shoulder. She murmured something into it, nodded once, then hung up before we were fully in the room. "Thanks for waiting," the coordinator said. She didn't sit. She set the packet down and slid it across the desk so it faced all of us. She pointed to a line halfway down the page. "We just need to confirm who has been acting in this role," she said, "and who will be moving forward." My mother-in-law leaned in. "I've been handling appointments," she said. "Transportation, all of it." The coordinator nodded. "That's noted," she said. Her pen moved once, making a small mark in the margin. "We also have records of calls and emails coming from this number." She tapped the page lightly. "And that number belongs to—" She stopped, looked up. "You," she said, to me, finally using the word without emphasis. I didn't react. I held the envelope steady. The clerk shifted her weight and adjusted the papers in her hand. "There's also a missing signature here," she said, voice careful. "It's been flagged twice." "Flagged?" my mother-in-law repeated. Too quickly. "Yes," the clerk said. "Automatically." The word sat there. Automatic. Not personal. Not arguable. "We'll need to make a note," the coordinator continued, "and complete verification. It's standard. A couple of calls. Some cross-checking." "How long will that take?" my mother-in-law asked. The coordinator glanced at the clock on the wall. "Depends who answers," she said. She picked up the phone and dialed. We listened to it ring. Once. Twice. She hung up and tried another number. This one connected. She turned slightly away from us, lowering her voice, but not enough to hide the shape of the conversation. Names, dates, a pause, a quiet "thank you." When she hung up, she didn't smile. She didn't frown either. She just set the phone down. "We'll finish the review today," she said. "Until then, decisions pause." My mother-in-law's fingers tightened on her purse strap. "Pause what decisions?" she asked. "Scheduling, authorization," the coordinator said. "Anything that requires a signature." She slid the packet back into the folder and closed it. The sound was soft, final. My husband straightened. "So what happens now?" he asked. "We confirm," the coordinator said. "Then we update the record." "And until then?" my mother-in-law pressed. "Until then," the coordinator said again. "We wait." She stood and gestured toward the door. "We'll call," she added, "when it's done." The walk out felt longer than the walk in. The waiting room had refilled. People looked up as we passed, then looked away when they realized nothing loud was happening. Outside, the air felt colder. My mother-in-law stopped just past the automatic doors and turned to my husband. "This is unnecessary," she said. "I don't know why she had to make it complicated." I set the envelope back into my bag and zipped it closed. The zipper made a clean, unmistakable sound. "I called the number on the form," I said. Not louder than usual. Not softer either. My mother-in-law opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at my husband, waiting. He didn't answer right away. He stared at the doors as they slid open for someone else, then shut again. "We'll wait," he said finally. That night, my phone buzzed while I was drying my hands. A missed call, same office number. A second buzz followed, a voicemail notification. I didn't play it yet. I set the phone face down on the counter, right next to the bowl of keys. The envelope stayed zipped in my bag. The call came the next morning. I was halfway through wiping the counter when my phone buzzed, screen lighting up with the intake office number again. I dried my hands on a towel and answered. "We're still completing verification," the coordinator said. Papers shifted on her end. "I just wanted to let you know there may be a brief delay." "How brief?" I asked. "A day," she said. "Possibly 2. "Okay," I said. "That's all for now," she added. "We'll be in touch." When I hung up, the kitchen felt arranged differently, even though nothing had moved. The envelope stayed zipped in my bag by the door. The keys sat in their bowl. The calendar on the wall showed Tuesday circled in blue, then crossed through with a single line. My mother-in-law called an hour later. I watched the phone ring twice before picking it up. "This is getting out of hand," she said without greeting. "They called me this morning asking questions they've never asked before." "I talked to them yesterday," I said. "Yes," she said sharply. "I know." She waited, like she expected me to fill the space with reassurance. I didn't. "They said things were on pause," she continued. "That can't happen. There are appointments. They said they'd call." I said. A breath came through the line, tight and controlled. "You didn't need to insert yourself," she said. "This was handled." "Actually, I answered a voicemail," I said. Silence again, longer this time. "I'll handle it," she said finally. "Okay," I said. She hung up without saying goodbye. That afternoon, my husband came home earlier than usual. He set his bag down and loosened his tie, then stood in the doorway to the kitchen, looking at the counter like he expected to see something new there. "Mom's upset," he said. "I know," I said. He nodded, then rubbed his forehead with his thumb. "She says the office won't schedule anything until the record's updated." "That's what they told me," I said. He opened the fridge, closed it, opened it again. "She's asking me to call," he said. "You can," I said. He paused, then shook his head. "They already have your number," he said. It wasn't a question. "They called me," I said. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "She says this makes her look bad." I slid a plate into the cabinet and shut the door. "It's a form," I said. He watched me for a second, then uncrossed his arms. "Who's supposed to sign?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I wiped the counter once more, slow and thorough, then set the cloth down. "They'll tell us," I said. Dinner that night was quiet. No phone calls, no updates. The television stayed off. We ate, stacked plates, rinsed them, and went to bed like it was any other weekday. The next day, my sister-in-law texted. "She's pacing," it read. "Won't say why." I didn't reply. By late afternoon, the coordinator called again. This time, her voice sounded settled. "We've completed verification," she said. "We're updating the record now." "Okay," I said. "There will be a corrected form," she added. "It will list the responsible party clearly. We'll need a signature." "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning," she said, "in person." After I hung up, I sat at the table and folded a piece of scrap paper into quarters, then unfolded it and smoothed it flat. I did it twice more, then stopped. My husband came in and set his phone down, screen up. A notification banner faded without him touching it. "They're calling a meeting," he said. "Mom wants us both there." I nodded. "They said tomorrow morning," I said. He sat, pushed his chair in carefully, then reached across the table and took my hand. He didn't squeeze it. He just rested his fingers there, like he was checking the temperature. "I should have stopped it," he said. I didn't answer. I turned my hand palm up and let his fingers fall away. That night, I put the envelope back in my bag and zipped it closed. I set the bag by the door, lined up with my shoes. In the morning, we drove together. The radio stayed off again. My mother-in-law was already in the parking lot when we arrived, standing beside her car with her arms folded. She nodded when she saw us. No smile. No greeting. Inside, the coordinator met us at the desk with a folder in her hands. The tabs stuck out, labeled neatly. "Let's take a seat," she said. The room filled with chairs and people and the low sound of waiting. The folder stayed on the desk, closed. The coordinator led us into a small room off the main hall. The door didn't latch all the way the first time, so she pulled it closed again until it clicked. A round table sat in the center with 3 chairs already spaced out. A 4th chair was pushed back, slightly crooked, like someone had stood up in a hurry and never returned. She set the folder on the table and turned it so the tab faced outward. The label was clean, printed, centered. No one touched it for a second. My mother-in-law sat first. She placed her purse on her lap and folded her hands over it like a lid. My husband sat beside me, close enough that our elbows almost met, not close enough to be a statement. The coordinator sat across from us and opened the folder. Paper slid against paper. She didn't rush. She flipped to the first page and laid it flat with her palm. "Thank you for coming in," she said. Her voice was the same as it had been every time, steady, procedural, not warm and not cold. The hallway noise faded behind the door. I could still hear the distant beep of a copier. Someone laughed once in the waiting room and stopped. "We completed verification," she said. "We updated the record. This is the corrected intake form." She lifted the top page, checked the corner, then put it back down. Her finger traced a line without tapping this time. "Responsible party," she read aloud, and stopped at the name. She said my name clearly, like it belonged on the page and nowhere else. My mother-in-law's hands tightened on her purse strap. The leather creaked. She didn't look at me. She looked at the coordinator, waiting for a second name, a correction, anything that would soften it. The coordinator didn't add anything. She turned the page once, then back again, as if confirming that the ink hadn't changed. My husband swallowed. I saw his throat move. He looked at the form and nodded once, small, then kept his eyes down. The coordinator slid the page a few inches toward me and placed a pen beside it, not pushed into my hand, just placed. "Signature here," she said, "and a date." I picked up the pen. It felt lighter than I expected. The cap clicked when I pulled it off. The sound carried in the small room. I signed. 1 line. No flourish. I wrote the date in numbers and put the pen back down in the same place. The coordinator watched the ink dry for a moment, then nodded, as if a box had been checked somewhere I couldn't see. "From here," she said, "appointment scheduling and authorization will come through the responsible party listed." "I've won backed." My mother-in-law's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Her face stayed composed, but the effort showed in the stillness around her eyes. She adjusted the purse on her lap, pulling it closer, then farther, then settling it again. "It's just for paperwork," she said, voice too light. The coordinator didn't argue. "It's for the record," she corrected, calm. "And the record guides what we can do." There was a pause after that. Not dramatic, just the kind that happens when there isn't a next move. My mother-in-law glanced toward the door. My husband looked at his hands. The coordinator waited, pen resting across her notebook like it had nowhere else to be. In that quiet, I felt the dinner table again. The word, the plates, the way everyone had watched to see what I'd do. Nothing in this room matched that. No one here cared who had said what over chicken and water glasses. They cared about the line that was no longer blank. The coordinator closed the folder and pressed it flat with her palm. "We'll send a copy to the contacts listed," she said. "You'll also receive an email confirmation." My mother-in-law's phone buzzed inside her purse. The sound was muffled, but we all heard it. She didn't reach for it. My husband's phone buzzed too, on the table beside his elbow. He turned it over, face down, without looking. The coordinator stood and opened the door. The hallway sound rushed back in footsteps, a receptionist's voice, a child whining softly. She held the folder against her chest and walked out without waiting for us to follow, like the meeting had ended the moment the signature hit paper. We stepped into the hall behind her. People in the waiting room looked up, saw our faces, and looked back down. The man with the baseball cap from earlier was there again, seated with his knee bouncing. His eyes flicked to my mother-in-law, then away quickly. My mother-in-law walked a half step ahead of us. Her shoulders were set. Her pace was careful, not fast. Outside, the automatic doors opened and closed behind us with a soft hiss. The air smelled like rain even though the ground was dry. At the car, my mother-in-law paused with her hand on the handle and looked at my husband. There was a question in her face. Not spoken. She waited for him to fill it. He didn't. He opened our car door and held it for me. I got in and set my bag on the floor by my feet. The envelope was inside, still zipped, still squared at the corners. As we drove away, my phone buzzed once, an email notification. I didn't open it. I turned the screen off and set the phone face down in the center console. At home, I took the envelope out and placed it into the folder I'd bought the day before, the kind with a stiff spine and a tab you can write on. I slid it in flat, no bending, and closed the cover. I labeled the tab with a single word and pressed it down so it stuck. Then I put the folder in the kitchen drawer where we keep the manuals and spare keys. I pushed the drawer shut until it clicked, and the house went back to its normal sounds.